things, there was a stress also which would build up, because it is not something I would do naturally. It is something I would kind of have to inculcate within myself to be able to deliver. So then I decided, why not spend this energy on this thing. And my own family has always been a family of professionals into medicine, into legal, into banking, into this that. But my in-laws family have been into business, so that helped. My own family thought I had gone mad. I mean, my own family's idea was, you do the best of courses everywhere, get into teaching. Even if it's a medicine, you have to teach medicine. I mean, that's where my family background is. But in-laws have been supportive in terms of being in business and all. So that's when I decided to take the plunge, and touch wood, clicked.
Um, I think for me, the decisions, I had two triggers. Like we already talked about them, but I don't know where you used to fly back and forth from for 6 months.
Whole of Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific region.
Yeah, so I did pretty much the same thing. For 2 years, I lived in Jakarta, and I had to keep going up and down. And before that, I think 10 years, I practically lived out of a suitcase, and I used to be in the airport more often than anywhere else. I think after a point that got to me, and especially when I was in Jakarta, I just didn't get the feeling that that's what I wanted to do. And somewhere I, put this target in my head that at the age of 45, I'm going to retire and do my own stuff. Those were just things in my head. But then I was also forced into it in a way because my father passed away. My father was the founder of the schools, and it was a large institution. And so my husband joined first because we had to handle it. And then I moved into a new job primarily because I didn't want all that traveling. But then financially also, there are some commitments that you have to consider, especially when my husband decided to come into education. But then finally, for me, I just thought, after a point, I just don't want to be in that rat race anymore. Yes, you said peak of the career, and I thought, okay, from here, what next? I mean, you're already there, you're already on a board, you're doing all of this. Why don't I do all of that for myself? A similar thought. And I felt that, or rather, I saw around me that most educational institutions were run by academicians. So they were teachers who became administrators, and I found that there was a lot wanting, and the education sector really needed a change. And with both my husband and I being, management grads, I felt that this is a place I could make a change. And that's why, even though it's a school, because I do things so differently, I think that's what gives me the satisfaction of being an entrepreneur in the education world. So these were my things of moving. And till today, I have friends in the corporate sector who ask me, so don't you miss traveling? Don't you miss the corporate world? And I said, no, not one iota.
Okay, a bit different question to you. Basically, like you've handled so many instances, you have, worked towards, you know, through this, legal framework, work towards a bit of a equality in that way. So tell us or share us a moment where you felt you cracked it. I mean, gave that moment that gave you a joy. I mean, out of all the instances of your handling. Yes.
You see, when you are a lawyer, you're always fighting somebody else's battle. So every time you see your client happy, you feel that you've cracked it. But when you're coming to your own moment, when I felt that I have cracked something and I've done something as a woman, is that what you're asking me? Then let me tell you, there was this time, I was just walking down the corridor and suddenly a person, huge guy with a very baby face, he suddenly came and lay down at my feet. And I said, what's wrong with you? He said, Didimoni, I have lost my case in the tribunal and I walked into the High Court and I saw you and I thought that you would do my case for me. So I said, it's impossible. I mean, what is your case about? So he gave me his papers. I looked into his papers, and I found that he had been caught. You know, he was a BSF Jawan, and he had been caught sleeping 16 times on duty. And every time he was let off with a small minor sensor here and there. The 17th time, when he was caught sleeping with his gun. And so he was terminated without any procedure. So he went to the tribunal, and the tribunal judge records that when he asked him, "What are you doing?" I called him to the witness box. He was actually sleeping. And so the tribunal rejected his case. They said, "No, you don't have any case." So the matter came up to the High Court, and the single judge before the High Court, the judge was so furious with the lawyer who was doing his case. The judge asked him, "Where is your client?" And he said, "Lordship, he's at the back." Said, "I want to see your client." When they turned around, he was actually sleeping in the courtroom.
He had some illness.
Maybe. Now, that is the, yeah. So there was something wrong, he was sleeping. And then the court said he doesn't deserve to do a job of a BSF. So then I asked him, I said that, "Why do you go to sleep?" So he says, "Actually, I'm not sleeping, I just sit with my eyes closed." And as you said, I guess that there was some problem with him. So then I said, "But legally and technically I can't do anything for you until you have a medical certificate." Then his daughter one day comes to the High Court, and she takes out her eardrops and she gives it to me, and she says that, she tells me in Bengali, she says, "Didi, I have nothing. My father says that because he doesn't have money, nobody is working on his case, but I have to give my class 10 exams, so take this and do my case for me." So then I studied his case. I said, "You keep it with you." I studied his case. And after studying his case, I found that he had been found sleeping on the 4th of April in the night at 2 p.m. That would technically make it the 5th of April. You get it? He was on duty from 10 to 6 in the morning. So he started his duty on the 4th in the evening at 10, and he would be off duty on the 5th. So when he was caught sleeping, that was 2 p.m. in the night, 2 a.m. in the night, that would make it the 5th and not the 4th of April. So I wrote a letter to his commandant. And the commandant, he told my client, he says, "Oh, your lawyer is a lady. What else can you expect from a woman? She's the only one who will come up with a, theory like this." So I moved an appeal in the High Court. And when the appeal came up, I told the judge, I said, "Lordship, I am not asking for any order because there is nothing in defense of my client. All I'm asking you to do is to see the conduct of the commandant." So the judge said, "Mrs. Mukherjee, how are we coming to such a stage that you take money from your client, you file an appeal, and then you want to withdraw the appeal, and you've pocketed the money?" I said, "Lordship, I have not taken any money. I'm doing this pro bono, but just look into it." So when I pointed this thing out to him, he was quite surprised. He said, "All right, I said, "Lordship, it seems the entire department is sleeping." So the BSF commandant was called to court to come with the original documents. He came with the original documents, and it was found that actually it was the 5th. He should have signed the document on the 5th, but he signed it on the 4th. So it was there. After about 5-6 years, this girl comes to court. She touches my feet, and you know what she says? She says, "Didi bhai, I have done my law. I want to practice law." I said, "But why did you do your law?" She says, "Because you did something which I never imagined a woman could do. You studied the papers," and I realized what is the value of studies. That was a point, when I really felt that, when you work and you could set an example to a girl, because she was really very poor and she actually managed to pass out, and then now she's she did her judicial exams, and now she's one of the junior judges in the lower courts.
Wonderful. So, with this, interesting, we almost come to the end, and be holding you back for a very long time. And my last question, same question to all of you would be that what is the message that you would like to pass on to a generation which is upcoming, to a generation which is still fighting for equality? What would that message be? Starting from you. Start from there? Okay.
I think the message that I would like to give is for women, take care of yourself. That's my message because I have seen with most women, mother-in-law, and a lot of friends, moms also, their health comes last. And they don't realize how much the entire family depends on them for anything, whether you're at home or whether you're elsewhere. So I think healthcare is really important, and women need to understand that if they're not well, they should talk about it. They should get treated. They should not just be quiet and stay at home. I think this is something that women of all ages need to learn and they need to do. And they need to be fit and healthy. I think that's one mantra that I would tell everyone to do. Of course, education everyone is talking about, but awareness is most important. Today, there's so much of media, and there is so much that people can learn about and see from different people. I think be aware of your rights, be aware of what you can do and the changes that you can make, and don't believe in, what generations tell you. I think just do your own thing. And I think everyone who does their own thing will finally succeed because that's your passion. And that's something that you want to do and not something that you've been forced to do. I think these are the two things that I would say.
Thank you. Gave me some time to think it out. So, what I would say is a lot of people believe that we live in a post feminist world. And people seem to think feminism is something bad. There's so much of militancy associated with it in the West. But here in India, I think we should go by the standard definition that a feminist is somebody who believes that all human beings should have the same social, political, and economic opportunities. And each one of us need to do what we can to ensure that everybody around us sees people as human beings first. Not she's a woman, she's this, she's that, and so forth. So don't give up. Just keep up that fight. Thank you.
Okay, something on the similar lines. I was thinking it is very simple. There is no man, no woman. All of us need some skills to survive, to do well, and to prosper in life. Let us all identify our core strengths and work towards making ourselves a better human beings and everyone around us. Live in a peaceful world, basically. Give peace to everyone around us and be at peace ourselves. So that should be the biggest thing. And I don't see much difference between a man and a woman when it comes to financials, to careers, to family life, to anything. Anyone can get into any role and excel in it. Be excellent in that role. We should look at that as an option. Thanks.
They have all said it. But you know what I would say is that don't look for equality, look for dignity. Our dignity is ours. We've all seen the movie Pink, where, everybody remembers no means no. But have you looked at it from the other point of view? We have to remember one thing. We as women have to set the mode. As she rightly said, we have to educate the men. We have to educate ourselves also to have dignity in ourselves. When I am going for a night club, I wear a two-piece and I go there. Then I should ensure that I'm going to a nightclub wearing two pieces in a car where the others don't see me. Now, when I say this, it may sound archaic. It is not. Let me tell you where I look at dignity. When a lion sees a herd of deer, it runs after the most beautiful deer, lands up devouring the weakest and the most susceptible one. We have to, when we talk about our dignity, we have to understand a basic difference. Men were born predators. When we women walk on the road, we want the men to say, "You're looking beautiful." When I enter the house, I want my husband to say, "Hey, you're looking nice today." When we walk into a club, we want the men to see us and say, "You are looking beautiful." So we want that validation of being a woman, and we want it from the men. Same way, when we are accepting this notion, there's another notion. When I and my husband or a man are in the same act, it is I who walk on the street with a big stomach, telling everybody, "Look, I've been in an act and I'm going to have a baby." It's not the men who are doing it. So this is a difference. Learn to understand this difference. Learn to respect it. And therefore, when rapes take place, the 16th December, in all the cases we find, it is always the poorest of the poor girls being raped. You know why? Because we set the example. When we walk out and we do not think about those who are being exposed to what we are doing, somewhere we are bringing out the predators in them, and the susceptible women are getting affected. So I would say, fight your battle not for equality, fight it for dignity. Let us understand we are women. Let us understand that we are proud of being women. Let us understand that the role of a man and a woman is different. It is not it is not encroaching upon each other's, land that is taking the equality away. It is the lack of understanding the values by which both the genders are surviving. And if, as a women, we want that dignity, we have to understand the dignity of a man, and we have to bring up our sons to understand the dignity of a woman. I would say, let it be a battle of dignity, not of equality.
Thank you. With this, we come to the end, and it's been a very two panels and very varied discussion. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we also feel good about it because kind of unknowingly we have a very diverse panel from various walks of life, from various stream of functionalities, and representing mostly the corporate or the corporate framework that way. So thank you, each of you, from our side.
Thank you.